appreciate all of you being here this evening. I'm John Lowe, Assistant Superintendent, and this is a monthly opportunity for us to meet with stakeholders to talk about a variety of topics at Washington Township. We have spent a lot of time over the last few months working through our school calendar for the year 12-13, discussing the potential 13-14 calendar. Some other big items have been changing of our student day, which was recently approved by our Board of Education in the last month. We had a very shortened elementary day compared to many of our neighbors in Marion County, and we're pleased we're able to add some instructional time to the elementary students, and the goal of that process was to do so without interfering, if you will, with the secondary day to the point that it was going to impact them negatively in their instructional time. It might sound easy when you're dealing with transportation and all of that. It's a very challenging piece. And the advice that we received, the feedback we received from the advisory council was very instrumental in getting to that final stage and that final approval. So we're certainly appreciative of that. We start every meeting by just talking a little bit about who we are and the different constituencies that have been represented throughout this process. Parents and students and staff members, of course, and community members and business leaders have weighed in at various times throughout the process. We will probably, I'm very confident saying it won't go until 6:30 this evening. We have some time we're going to spend learning more about our International Baccalaureate process as we move closer to all of our schools being authorized as International Baccalaureate schools. And so Allison Smith is going to come up here very shortly and walk us through that process this evening. She has a great activity planned for us to work together. Throughout the process of the advisory council, we go through these protocols every meeting. It's advisory in nature. It's not a decision-making body. It's just one where we gather feedback. Again, extremely helpful to us as a district to get the pulse of the community on many items. It's not something that is isolated to one particular issue, or certainly personnel or open topics that come to advisory council. It's not an open mic, I guess is what you would say. And we just make sure we go through those protocols each meeting, just so we kind of know the ground rules. It's not to say that we would not open our doors, our phone lines, and our email to any of those issues. We certainly want to know if there are concerns and issues facing you in whatever role you have. But the format of that would be to come through CEC or to communicate with us in various ways. So we always have to go through those protocols just so we know what the ground rules are for each group. Well, I'm going to back up. I think that slide got put in the wrong place. Tonight, we have two main focus. One is to get you a little bit more familiar with the International Baccalaureate process that we are currently embarking on as a district. And next month, our elementary schools will be visited by International Baccalaureate authorizers. They will be spending time in our schools, and it's an exciting time for our elementary staff and principals in our district to be able to show how far we've come and to show that we are prepared and ready to employ all of the components of International Baccalaureate. I know Allison will help show you a little bit about what those are in a few moments. So tonight, one of the goals is to get you a little bit more informed about that process, and then again, since it's an advisory council, your feedback on how we can communicate that best to our community about who we are and where we're going. We try through Twitter and through newsletters and through Facebook and through our website and through many ways to get that word out to our community. But sometimes the verbiage that we may use sounds like it makes sense to us, but we're not speaking folks' language. Things like that. We need that kind of advice and feedback on how we can communicate better with our community. So that will be part of our process this evening. The second goal, and that's why the slide was a little bit early tonight, is just to get your thoughts on how we formulate our topics for this group for next year. As you saw in your email, if you received that as part of this evening, that this will be our last advisory council meeting for the spring. But we do want to plan ahead, and so I have a few thoughts maybe to help the brainstorming process. But as you look ahead, or you have questions about things that Washington Township is doing, or things that the state of Indiana is doing, or topics that you think might be affecting your school, or your teachers, or your students, those are the things that we want to get from you this evening as we plan ahead for 13, 14, so we can use our time wisely. So those are our two goals tonight, and I'm confident we can get those done well before 6:30. We still get out to enjoy some of this wonderful 80-degree March weather that we're having. So without any other delay, I'm going to turn it over to Allison Smith, our International Baccalaureate Coordinator, to walk us through the process of this evening.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be able to talk about the International Baccalaureate Program. And we'll go over some general information today, but I really do encourage you to get into classrooms and talk to your teachers and talk to the principals and really see the work that's going on. I'll be able to give you a glimpse of it, but the most exciting work is what the kids are doing. So I encourage you to not only learn more about it via our website, but also being in the classrooms and in the schools. I want to start by showing this picture. I just want to ask you to think a little bit about what your definition of learning is. Think about what our classrooms used to look like and what they look like now. Dr. Millman attended a presentation by Will Richardson, who is an educational author and also owner of a company called Connected Learning. And his definition of learning was mobile, network, global, collaborative, self-directed, inquiry-based, on-demand, transparent, and personalized. I thought, how is that definition so different from what it was like perhaps when we went to school, when classrooms looked like this? And to think now, classrooms can't still look like this. Our world is different, our students are different, what they need to know is different. Think about if you went into a dental office or a doctor's office, and they hadn't changed their practices or their technology in 15 years. Probably might find a new dentist. So we have to be responsive in education to our students and to the changing needs that are facing our 21st century. And they say that the role of teachers is to create conditions for invention rather than provide ready-made knowledge. Information is doubling every 15 minutes. Textbooks can't be written, designed, printed into our students fast enough before some of the information is already out of date. So it's important that in our schools and in our classrooms that we're providing context for learning and teaching students how to learn and how to find the information and how to investigate and how to be critical thinkers and problem solvers. And that's what we're doing with the International Baccalaureate Program. We are being transformative. We are being innovative in how we're teaching our students. So the biggest question I continue to get though is what is it? And will it be offered at all levels? Yes. So let me tell you a little bit about how the continuum works here in Washington Township. In our primary years program, which is our elementary school, we often hear that referred to as PYP. That's our primary years program, that's K through 5. That program is all-inclusive, so every child in Washington Township is involved in the IB primary years program. That continuum works up into our middle and high school in grades 6 through 10. And I know that's kind of different for us. We often think of middle years as middle school 6 through 8. But because this is an international program in 10th grade in many countries is kind of their graduation year, the middle years program are often referred to as MYP, goes 6 through 10. And that's all-inclusive program as well. So every child in Washington Township in grades 6 through 10 will be involved in the middle years program. And then you have the diploma program in the high school, which is in grades 11 through 12. We've had that program for 20-some years. So that's not new to Washington Township. And that's in grades 11 and 12, and that's an exclusive program. Students actually have to apply to be a part of that. It's not designed for all students. It's a different curriculum. They take different classes, whereas the MYP and PYP is the same classes and all students are involved in it. So what makes these programs different from what you're seeing in perhaps a more traditional school or what we were before we were implementing IB? This is based on an inquiry instruction. So teaching students to take more ownership for their learning, giving them problems, giving them situations, and giving them the tools to discover new knowledge and to solve those problems. It's focusing on critical thinking, working on problem-solving skills. So instead of the teacher being up at the front, always lecturing, we know there's going to be a time for some direct instruction, of course, but always being the knower of knowledge and disseminating that knowledge, really teaching students how to think and how to discover knowledge on their own. It's a long process to become an authorized IB school. It's not just a one-day event. And I want to talk a little bit about that process. Dr. Millman mentioned our elementary schools are very close to their authorization visit. So I'll just explain a little bit about what that process looks like. For authorization, there will be a team from IB that will come to our schools, and we have a separate team that comes to each one of our elementary schools, and next year they'll come to the middle and high school. About a team of 3 people. They are current IB practitioners. They might be administrators in an IB school. They might be teachers. They could actually be IB coordinators. So they come from a variety of different positions. They'll come to our schools. They'll review our curriculum documents. They'll look at what we call our planners, and that's units of study that the teachers have written. Teachers work very hard on these units of study. And I might mention though too, those units of study are based off of Indiana state standards. That's one of the biggest questions I get. Are we teaching something different? Are we teaching international standards? Those units of study are based off of Indiana state standards. So we haven't changed per se what we're teaching, we've changed how we're teaching it. So they'll review those planners. They also do interviews with students, they do interviews with parents, they'll talk with administration, they'll review all of our documents, and then they'll write a report that will then be sent to the regional manager of IB. He'll make a recommendation for authorization, and then he sends it to the IB organization, the national or the international organization, and then they'll decide whether or not we can authorize the school. Most likely, they'll authorize us what they call matters to be addressed. That's not uncommon. What that's saying is you're on the right track, you have the right philosophy, here's some things that we want you to continue to work on, here's some things we want you to address, to develop, to grow in with this authorization. So that's the kind of process that we look for. We probably won't hear back from IB. They're coming this April, and I'll anticipate that we hear back from them sometime in this summer. They say about 90 days is when we'll hear back in terms of authorization. So again, the teachers are working really hard, and I'm really excited about it. I don't look at this as a tense time. I look at this as a time to showcase the great work that they're doing, to showcase our students. You can walk around and students can talk the language, and they can be in the interviews. And they're doing a really great job, and they understand it, and they understand their learning and how they're being a part of it. So I'm just going to talk, the framework is big. There's lots of things that we can talk about, but I want to focus today on the learner profile. How many of you have heard or seen the learner profile come home with your student or talked about? Some students here who've seen it? Sure. The learner profile here is the type of learner that we're striving to develop. It's not your profile of the perfect student. It's the student that we're striving to develop. And it's been fun, actually. I might put Matt on the spot here. His student is a first grader, right? First grader at Allisonville. And he was driving into Science Saturday, I think, and then they were going to come for the Great North Run. And they were like, oh, it's cold out. You sure want to go running? And his son turns to his friend and says, my dad's a risk taker. And they're learning this language, and they're understanding what it means and understanding how it's applying to their lives. So one of the biggest questions that I get about these learner profile attributes is, well, how is this different from our character values? And so what the activity, or what I need your input on today, is to take a look at some of the attributes and look at our 6 character values and see how they're embedded, or how they work together. We're not a district that's going to abandon character values. We're always going to have our values, and those are character values that we always want to demonstrate and to promote in our schools. But we also want to make sure that we're not bombarding our students with so many words and so much new vocabulary. For instance, in the PYP, they have the learner profile, the 10 attributes. They also are required to have 11 attitudes, like empathy and cooperation that they teach, and then these 6 character values. So what we're trying to do is to show the connection and show how we can teach our character values within the learner profile. So the blue paper you have and our work for tonight is to look at the attributes and see the corresponding character values and see how we can embed those within our learner profile. And then on the back of that, there are 3 questions that like some information from you about how are you seeing your child demonstrate the attributes at home, what kinds of things might you see them doing. If you're seeing any changes in your student as a learner as a result of the IB. And then the third question is, what other questions do you have about IB? You know, we've done lots of presentations at the school level and at the district level about IB, but what are some things that you want some further information about? And then I know Dr. Moon is going to talk about future advisory council meetings, so these can be the topics for some of our future meetings. Dr. Moon, I don't know if you want to present things at work time, or do you want to give them some work time now and then present at the end? Okay. Okay, so why don't we take about 10 minutes or so to answer those questions, and then Dr. Miller will wrap up.
Presentation by Will Richardson. It was very informative, and one of the things that it reminded me of, and he shared some of the information as well, not only the definition of learning, but another term that we hear often in education is the 21st century skills. You hear that a lot. But the more I've seen definitions of 21st century skills, the more I've been convinced, including Will Richardson's definitions, that really they're any century skills. I think that whenever I've had the opportunity to spend time with business leaders, people who are hiring our students after high school or after graduation from college, the last thing they look for, or one thing that I've never heard a business leader look for, is their 3rd grade ISTEP score. Or I want to have somebody who can take a really good at a standardized test. I've heard them talk a lot about I want a communicator, I want a problem solver, I want someone who can work as a team member, I want someone who can be a problem identifier. We spend a lot of time talking about problem solving, but so people who can do program evaluation can look at a situation and identify the problem first before you determine what needs to be solved. And I look at the activities, the approach, the framework, whatever you want to call it, around what International Baccalaureate is expecting as a delivery method of instruction. And I just think it fits so seamlessly with those any century skills, not just 21st century skills, but any century skills. So we certainly appreciate your feedback and questions, again, on how we can communicate that best to our community, and to think in those terms as well, about we're building our future leaders and problem solvers, and that's pretty exciting. I wanted to also point out that as you came in, you could have picked up a half sheet of paper outlining the surveys that are out and available. Each of our schools are required on a couple of fronts. One, through state and federal dollars they receive to survey their constituencies, parents, students, staff in their communities. And so we have a survey available that when you go on and click that, you can choose your school, and all that data will be aggregated, disaggregated as necessary through that process. We certainly encourage you to do that. That'll be open for the next 3 or 4 weeks. So we'll be, you can check back. I guess when the link disappeared, it was too late. So if you get on there and take that survey, that would be extremely helpful to us, and an opportunity for you to give us some feedback on future topics for our district as well. Now for the remainder of our time, it may only take you a few seconds, honestly, so just take as much time as you need. We do need some feedback, or would like to get some feedback on next year as we look for topics for Washington Township Advisory Council. I just threw a few bullets up on the screen today, just to kind of get our thoughts going a little bit. Certainly the 12-13 calendar is set. We'll be taking a calendar option to the Board of Education here in the next couple of months for 13-14. It looks like, based on feedback from this group and through our Teachers Association and surveys, etc., that 13-14 will look very, very similar, not almost identical to the 12-13 calendar. There's been some questions about why roll out an identical calendar when you haven't lived through that new calendar yet. The problem with that is if we change that, we'll be a little bit late in the game for parents. And so, for consistency's sake, that's the version that will roll out. And so, it could become a very relevant topic for this group next year as we see concerns arise or questions arise when we're on that, because we have some time to really think through 14, 15 and beyond and see how that would work. We might also have a clearer picture of some standardized testing for the state, Common Core state standards, which you've heard a little bit about probably, and how those will impact testing and testing windows. We might know more about it by that time. So that's a potential topic. The Common Core state standards. There's a few on here, including this one, that I don't know what advice you could necessarily give us, because a lot of those decisions have been made for us. However, advice on how we implement instruction, programming, priorities around funding, etc., on implementing the Common Core state standards, which is going to be required of all Indiana schools actually beginning now. We're actually teaching on 2 platforms now. The grading of schools, the A through F model, how that's going to impact or potentially impact our schools. Certainly that can be an informational item that we can share with you as more of those metrics roll out and rules and regulations and the legislative updates and guidelines around those laws are rolled out. We can inform you on that. But again, it could be getting your help on communicating with your constituencies within your individual schools that you represent. Could be helpful to us. Internet safety, things like that. Perhaps we can, as information, get information to you about ways you can help our kids be safe on the internet. Will Richardson, again, back to that same presentation, he had a very interesting saying. He said that it should potentially be our goal that every graduate from our schools, by the time they walk across the stage, are Googled well. That each student is Googled well. Not can Google well, but each student is Googled well. And his point of that is that right now, in my age bracket, I'm a consumer of technology, for the most part. I mean, I use it to create stuff like this, but we have first graders who do this. And so, this isn't really, I'm a consumer of technology. Our kids can use technology to create. It's their identity. A colleague of mine suggested that the best present I could give my son, like at age 8 or 9, was to go ahead and buy his domain name. Because prediction is, in the not too distant future, that will be his identity. Everything will be linked to that domain name. You know, his resume, his work, his everything. His life will be his domain name, perhaps. So as we look at technology not as a way of consuming, but as a way of creating, that it would be important for our kids, when you type in that name, that all of those things that they create and make is what is shown, not maybe things that you don't want to pick them up for those students. So every student should be Googled well. So I think it could be a very important and timely topic for this group. Get that word out in your communities, but also to give you some of that current information around that. So that was just one thought that popped up as well. Other safety concerns, bullying, character building, supports for families around that whole topic, getting your advice on programming around those topics. Just, again, those are just thought thought bubbles at my desk as I put those down to the PowerPoint. So for the remainder of the time, you can chat at your tables, bounce these ideas around. Please list them for us. If you have questions about anything tonight, Alice and I would be happy to answer those questions for you. And you can leave as soon as you're done with that project. And we certainly appreciate your attendance again this evening. Thank you. And this year. Thank you.